With American aids and military advisory, the Republic of Vietnam, RVN, under the administration of President Diem was safe and strong. But then something went wrong. By the middle of the year 1963, President Kennedy ordered the CIA, American spy agency, to urge the RVN military top generals to topple President Diem. No evidence that he ordered Diem killed, but the mutineers killed him on November 2, 1963. Why did Kennedy harm Diem? The reason is simple: he was a fool. He didn't listen to the advice of everyone, including his own brother Robert Kennedy and Vice President Lyndon Johnson. He blatantly violated the sovereignty of South Vietnam, interfering in its internal affairs in a way the U.S. had never done before. He fell into the trap set by the Communists and their collaborators. He believed that Diem had lost the people's support, without considering who those people were. He sided with the insurrection instigated by Vietcong, the shaved-head bandits disguised as Buddhist monks, and the protests organized by Communists. He thought that by changing the South Vietnamese government, he could rest assured that the counter-communist insurgency efforts of the RVN would continue to develop successfully with U.S. military aid. This way, he could easily boast to Congress and the American people that he had successfully defended the anti-communist outpost in Vietnam without having to send troops, meaning no American blood would be shed. And thus, he could easily win a second presidential term. Really, there was nothing more stupid than that. When Kennedy heard the news that President Diem had been brutally assassinated, he was stunned. He stood motionless, knowing that he had committed a crime, the crime of killing Diem, even though not directly. A month later, President Diem's spirit took revenge. Kennedy himself was shot in the head, and the whole world witnessed live as the bullet pierced through his brain. It was indeed a karmic retribution. After they killed President Diem, the commie lackeys in the RVN government destroyed the anti-guerrilla Hamlet strategy system of the Republic of Vietnam, and Vietcong freely infiltrated all over the territory of the Republic of Vietnam. Next, they pushed the shaved-head bandits to sabotage the Republic of Vietnam government in the parliament until it was paralyzed, and at the same time, the military juntas in the army fought for power, causing the Republic of Vietnam government to be in chaos. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Northern Communists and International Communists rushed to build the Ho Chi Minh Trail and sent hundreds of divisions to invade the Republic of Vietnam. That is the reason the U.S. had to send troops to Vietnam. It wasn't that the U.S. wanted it, but the situation required it as a result of the assassination of President Ngo Dinh Diem. So after Kennedy was assassinated, President Johnson had to pick a fight with the Communists through the Gulf of Tonkin incident to have a reason to drop bombs on the Northern Communist mad dogs and send pseudo troops into Vietnam to save the country. The Communists propagandized that America lost the war in Vietnam. That was a blatant lie. America only got bogged down in Vietnam because it made a mistake in killing President Ngo Dinh Diem. Fighting in the jungles was very difficult and dangerous for rooting out enemy. And also Vietcong had mingled and used Vietnamese for human shield in the hamlets all over South Vietnam, but it did not lose the Vietnam War. The American and the Republic of Vietnam armies fought heroically and never lost a major battle. The proof is simple. After America withdrew its troops in 1973, the Republic of Vietnam was still survive and intact. The U.S. withdrew its troops after signing the Paris Peace Agreement with the Communist China and North Vietnamese Communists. Under the supervision of several countries of the United Nations, the Paris Peace Treaty Accord agreed that the political fate of South Vietnam must be decided by the people's votes, not by violence or by force for any reason. But then in 1974, the U.S. Communist Congress trampled the Paris Agreement. It cut all aids to Vietnam, which violated the Paris Agreement that it would continue to militarily aid the RVN until election. Also, it would provide air and naval power assistance in case the North Commies attacked. Instead, it gave the green light to the Mad Dog Vietcong, lackeys for the Soviet Union at that time, to attack the Republic of Vietnam. To say that the Paris Agreement has no value to the U.S. because it was signed by the executive branch without the approval of the U.S. Congress is a blatant lies. Because the U.S. Congress had previously given the U.S. President full control over the Vietnam War, it is legitimate. The Paris Agreement was trampled by the Vietcong and the U.S. Communist-controlled Congress, but it never expires and it must be reviewed by the world for implementation, and that is what the people of South Vietnam wants. Was it true that the Republic of Vietnam an American puppet, and it was too coward to fight? And no, it is absolutely not true. The Republic of Vietnam, the RVN, was not created by United States, and the RVN fought very bravely against communist aggression to protect Vietnam. Because if you are someone's puppet, you must be installed by them, and you must serve them, not yourself. But the RVN was not installed by the United States, and never served the United States, it only served the Republic of Vietnam. Also, the RVN fought very bravely to protect Vietnam, not to protect the United States. Here is the historical evidence that the Republic of Vietnam was not created by the United States. After the Chinese Communists seized North Vietnam in 1954, Head of State Bao Dai commissioned Prime Minister Ngo Dinh Diem to establish a national government in the South. Prime Minister Diem established the Republic of Vietnam under a presidential system in 1955. Then he ran a presidential election campaign against Head of State Bao Dai, and he was elected by the South Vietnamese people as the first president of the Republic of Vietnam. This means that the Republic of Vietnam was established by Head of State Bao Dai, not the United States, and President Ngo Dinh Diem was elected by the people of the Republic of Vietnam, not installed by the United States. All of this truth is supported by historical evidence. Here is the historical truth about the Republic of Vietnam fought very bravely, defending the Republic of Vietnam, not the United States. First is the fight against guerrilla warfare. The South Vietnamese fight against communism from 1955 to 1965 was a fight against communist guerrilla warfare within South Vietnamese territory. Before the Chinese and Vietcong actually invaded South Vietnam, they had already planted guerrilla agents to carry out sabotage within South Vietnamese territory. Therefore, the U.S. provided military aid to the South Vietnamese government to counter guerrilla warfare, but it did not deploy SEATO troops as it was not yet necessary. The Republic of Vietnam, RVN, was very successful in fighting the Vietcong guerrillas, rendering them ineffective and on the verge of complete annihilation. However, after they assassinated President Diem and destroyed this strategic hamlet system, allowing Vietcong guerrillas to freely mingle with the population and use the people as hostages, shields, and simultaneously deploying hundreds of divisions with top-of-the-line weapons from China and the Soviet Union to hide in the jungles of Cambodia and Laos, and infiltrate RVN territory, disguised as guerrilla forces, the U.S. and its allies entered Vietnam, in 1965, to fight alongside the RVN. Second is the fight against hooliganism warfare. From 1965 to 1975, Vietcong with hundreds of divisions hiding along Vietnamese, Cambodia, and Laos borders, successfully infiltrated the civilian population throughout South Vietnam. Therefore, when Allied forces entered Vietnam to rescue the RVN, they had to take on a complex network of staged battlefield combats disguised as guerrilla warfare. I call it the hooliganism warfare, inside South Vietnam, and dangerous battles against North Vietnamese communists hiding in the jungles at the borders. However, the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces fought valiantly on both fronts, countering the Vietcong's staged guerrilla warfare and their covert jungle warfare. After the U.S. withdrew its troops at the end of 1972, the South Vietnamese armed forces continued to fight bravely to defend their nation. Evidence of this can be seen in continuous battles against guerrilla warfare throughout South Vietnam, as well as in battlefields against North Vietnamese invading forces such as the battles of Lower Laos, Rung Sat, Quang Tri, etc. South Vietnam never lost a single battle, and its territory was always fully protected. Therefore, To say that South Vietnam did not fight for itself is a lie. All of this is supported by historical evidence. The Vietnam War was not the war between heroic Vietnamese against the USA invasion, it was the war of the SEATO bloc, the ally of Southeast Asian nations, against the expansion of the international communist, the Third Bloc that happened in Vietnam, after Korea. South Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos were the protectorate countries, protected by the SEATO bloc against communist, particularly Commie China, expansionism. They were not created by the USA. Is this truth very difficult to understand? To say that the Republic of Vietnam was a puppet of the US, and that the Republic of Vietnam refused to fight on its own, is to shamelessly and ridiculously repeat the deceitful communist propaganda against the truth and historical evidences, by the professional liars. It is time for these liars to be exposed and destroyed. As a proverb says, peace only comes when the righteous wins, war continues if the wicked wins. The Vietnam War between the allies of nations against the evil global communists is not finished yet. It only changes form, but it still continues until Vietcong, the invaders, is driven out of the Republic of Vietnam and the Paris Peace Accord is implemented.